Samantha had always been a creature of routine, finding comfort in her quiet mornings and the predictable rhythm of her small apartment in the city. That day, she left early for her usual coffee run, hoping to steal a few minutes of calm before work. As she pushed open the cafe door, the warm aroma of roasted beans wrapped around her like a familiar blanket, and the soft murmur of conversations created a gentle background hum. She noticed him immediately, a man sitting alone in the corner, hunched over a stack of papers, his brow furrowed and hands trembling slightly as he flipped through them. There was something about the way he looked, a mixture of exhaustion and quiet despair, that tugged at her heart in a way she couldn't explain. She almost walked past, lost in her own thoughts, but a small accident changed everything. She bumped the corner of his table, spilling a little of her coffee near his papers. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she hurried to apologize, but he looked up and met her gaze with a faint, tired smile. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern, and in that instant, a fragile bridge formed between them, a tiny spark of connection that neither could ignore. His name was Daniel, and he explained, in a voice low and measured, that he was overwhelmed. Work deadlines, personal issues, and the weight of responsibilities that seemed too heavy to carry alone. Samantha listened, feeling an unexpected surge of empathy. She offered small gestures, advice here, a kind word there, messages to check if he was managing, never imagining how quickly her involvement would grow into something more significant. Each conversation revealed layers of Daniel's life: the pain of a divorce that had left him questioning himself, the loneliness that shadowed his days, the subtle hope that someone might care enough to notice him beyond his struggles. Samantha found herself thinking about him when she was at work, replaying his words, the way his eyes softened when he talked about things that mattered to him, the way his voice carried a gentle vulnerability. There was a magnetic pull she couldn't rationalize, a mixture of compassion and curiosity that made her heart race in moments of small connection, and she realized she wanted to help more than she had ever expected. Over time, her gestures, checking in with a text, sharing a quick story to make him laugh, leaving a comforting note, became part of their daily rhythm. Daniel began to rely on her presence, seeking her advice and enjoying her company more than he had anticipated, though neither of them spoke aloud the tension that hovered just beneath their conversations. Samantha noticed the subtle changes, the way he lingered on her words, the way his eyes would meet hers for just a second longer than necessary, the quiet sighs he released when he confided in her. Each interaction built a fragile intimacy, a thread connecting their hearts, and she could feel the line between friendship and something more growing thinner with every meeting. Even simple gestures, a shared laugh, a meaningful glance, the warmth of his hand brushing hers when handing over a notebook, began to carry weight, stirring emotions she hadn't expected to feel. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering if he was eating, sleeping, or feeling as lonely as she sometimes imagined. Their lives, previously separate and solitary, were slowly intertwining, not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with quiet, meaningful moments that carried emotional resonance. Samantha understood, even as the connection grew, that she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Helping him was no longer just a casual act of kindness. It had become a delicate dance of attention, care, and unspoken attraction. She questioned herself. Was it wrong to feel drawn to him, to want to be near him, to be the person who brought a little light into his world? Daniel, too, seemed unaware of how deeply he was leaning on her emotionally, how his gratitude had started to shift into something tender and quietly intense. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the cafe windows, illuminating the dust motes in the air, Samantha realized that she was no longer simply helping a man in need. She had become part of his world in a way that mattered, in a way that left her heart both exhilarated and apprehensive. That moment, small and ordinary to anyone else, carried the weight of possibility, the thrill of a connection that neither had fully acknowledged, but both felt keenly. She left the cafe that day with a flutter in her chest, replaying the small interactions over and over, sensing that her life had subtly shifted without warning, that she had been pulled into a story she had not anticipated but could not turn away from. There was an undeniable pull, a soft but persistent thread drawing her back, a quiet promise that something more was waiting just beyond the edges of what was safe and familiar. Samantha understood that their story had just begun, that the gentle warmth of her concern for Daniel was evolving into an emotional attachment that neither could name yet, and she felt both the thrill and the danger of walking this line. In the days that followed, every message, every shared laugh, every glance carried new significance. The cafe became more than a place for coffee. It became a space where hearts connected in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, where the line between friendship and something more began to blur. Samantha's mind swirled with anticipation, curiosity, and a quiet longing she hadn't felt in years, while Daniel, without fully realizing it, was opening his heart to a support and intimacy he hadn't allowed himself to seek. By the end of that week, both of them sensed that life as they knew it had shifted. A chance encounter over spilled coffee had grown into an unexpected emotional bond, fragile yet compelling, and Samantha realized with a mix of excitement and fear that she had stepped into a story that could change everything, a story filled with connection, longing, and the delicate tension of hearts slowly intertwining, leaving both of them teetering on the edge of something neither fully understood but both deeply felt. As days turned into weeks, Samantha and Daniel's connection grew in ways neither had expected, slowly transforming from casual kindness into something deeper and more meaningful. Each message she sent, each small act of encouragement, seemed to brighten Daniel's days, and he began to rely on her presence in ways that went beyond simple friendship. Their lunches became a comforting ritual, filled with shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet understanding. Daniel spoke of his struggles openly, revealing layers of himself he had never shared with anyone else, from the lingering hurt of a divorce to the pressure of being a single parent and balancing a demanding career. Samantha listened, offering empathy and insight, her heart drawn to his honesty and vulnerability, and she noticed herself smiling more, thinking about him at unexpected moments, wondering what he was doing, and longing for their next encounter. She began to see the little things that made him uniquely himself, the way he twirled a pen absent-mindedly when deep in thought, the gentle tilt of his head when he listened intently, the soft laugh that would escape him when something amused him. There was an unmistakable warmth in their interactions, a quiet intimacy that neither had fully acknowledged, but both felt keenly, a magnetic pull that lingered in the spaces between words, in the shared silences, in the comfortable closeness that seemed to grow naturally each time they met. Daniel began asking for more than advice or casual conversation. He sought her company, her perspective, her humor, and sometimes simply her presence. And Samantha found herself willingly giving it, even as she felt the boundaries of their relationship shift subtly. There were moments when her chest would tighten, a flutter of nervous anticipation whenever he reached out, when his eyes met hers with a lingering gaze that seemed to hold unspoken feelings, and she realized with a mix of exhilaration and caution that her care for him had deepened into a quiet longing she hadn't expected. Even the simplest gestures, him handing her a coffee with a faint smile, sharing a joke that made her laugh until her cheeks hurt, the way he would pause to listen attentively to her stories, felt loaded with significance, carrying the weight of emotional closeness that neither had planned but both were beginning to crave. Samantha often caught herself replaying their conversations in her mind, analyzing every laugh, every subtle glance, every pause, wondering if he felt the same unspoken connection she did. And Daniel, too, found himself thinking about her when he wasn't with her, looking forward to their next meeting, longing for the comfort of her presence, and feeling a sense of anticipation he hadn't experienced in years. Their connection grew in layers. There was the ease of friendship, the comfort of understanding, and underneath it, a tender emotional intimacy that hinted at the possibility of something more. One evening, as the sky blushed with the colors of sunset, they found themselves walking through a quiet park, the air cool and the city sounds distant. Daniel reached for Samantha's hand for the briefest moment, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through her, and she felt the emotional tension between them rise, a delicate mixture of excitement and uncertainty. They laughed at shared memories, debated trivial things, and yet, beneath it all, there was a current of longing neither wanted to name aloud. Samantha understood that she had become essential to Daniel's emotional world, just as he had become vital to hers, a realization that brought both comfort and apprehension. She felt alive in his presence, her heart beating faster at small interactions, and she realized that her feelings had grown beyond simple concern or friendship into something tender and deeply personal. Yet, even with the joy of connection, there was a quiet caution in both of them, an understanding that the bond they were nurturing was delicate, that the emotional closeness could be fragile if not handled with care. Daniel's gratitude often turned into subtle expressions of affection, longer conversations, quiet gestures of attention, small reassurances that spoke volumes, and Samantha noticed herself responding in kind, offering warmth, encouragement, and empathy that felt more intimate than before. Their emotional intimacy became a rhythm, a give and take of support and understanding, a dance of hearts recognizing each other in a way they hadn't before, and the line between friendship and something more began to blur in the most gentle and compelling way. Samantha felt a quiet thrill whenever Daniel shared a personal story, revealing vulnerabilities that were usually hidden from the world, and she realized that being trusted so fully created a bond that was both exhilarating and humbling. They began to communicate in small, private ways, texts filled with small jokes, messages that checked in on each other's well-being, and even unspoken cues that spoke louder than words, like lingering glances or a hand briefly brushing another's. Each interaction reinforced the quiet intimacy that was growing between them, making them both aware that their hearts were becoming entwined. Samantha noticed herself craving these moments, feeling a warmth when he responded to her texts, a joy when they laughed together, and a quiet ache when they were apart. Daniel, in turn, found himself drawn to her presence, comforted by her words, uplifted by her perspective, and longing for the simple companionship that she provided. One evening, while sharing a quiet dinner at a small cafe, Daniel confessed in a tentative voice that her presence had made his life feel lighter, that talking to her had become something he looked forward to more than anything else in his day. Samantha felt her heart tighten at his honesty, a mixture of happiness and apprehension swirling inside her, and she realized that their bond had deepened into something neither of them could easily define, but both felt profoundly. There was a thrilling tension in every conversation, a subtle excitement in the knowledge that they were becoming important to each other in ways that were unspoken but undeniable. As they walked back through the city streets that evening, the lights reflecting in puddles from an earlier rain, Samantha knew that her role in Daniel's life had shifted from casual friend to emotional anchor, and she wondered how far this connection might go, knowing that the warmth she felt for him was growing stronger every day. Their shared moments became a collection of memories filled with laughter, tender glances, and the quiet understanding that they were slowly opening their hearts to each other, a bond that was as exhilarating as it was delicate, leaving Samantha both enchanted and cautious as she navigated the tender complexities of a connection that was evolving into something she had never anticipated but could not resist. A story of emotional intimacy, longing, and a budding romance that neither had expected when they first met over a spilled cup of coffee, but both now cherished deeply, knowing that life had subtly shifted and that the next chapters of their story held promise, tension, and the quiet thrill of hearts discovering one another. As the weeks passed, the connection between Samantha and Daniel deepened in ways that neither of them could have predicted, moving beyond casual support into a realm of emotional dependency that both thrilled and frightened them. Daniel began sharing more of his inner world, revealing dreams, fears, and regrets he had kept hidden for years, while Samantha listened with a patience and understanding that made him feel seen in a way he never had before. Their conversations stretched late into the night, sometimes ending with awkward pauses, sometimes with laughter that lingered long after the call had ended, leaving both of them restless with thoughts of one another. Samantha noticed how much she anticipated these interactions, her day feeling incomplete without a message from him, a small acknowledgement, or even a simple shared joke that reminded them of their growing intimacy. Daniel, too, found himself seeking her more, calling not just for advice or comfort, but simply for the warmth of her presence, the reassurance that someone cared about his world and his struggles. The subtle ways they touched, sometimes a hand lightly brushing another's, sometimes a lingering gaze, became charged with meaning, though neither of them spoke about it directly, allowing the tension to build slowly, naturally, and irresistibly. Samantha began to feel the weight of her emotions. She cared deeply for him, yet she struggled with the uncertainty of what this closeness meant and where it might lead. She questioned whether it was wrong to feel drawn to him, to want to be near him, to long for the moments they shared, knowing full well that he was a man still navigating the complexities of his own life. Daniel, on his side, wrestled with similar thoughts, realizing that Samantha had become essential to his emotional balance, that her presence brought him a joy and a calm he had not known for years, and that he was quietly longing for more than just friendship. One rainy evening, the city streets glistening under streetlights, Daniel invited Samantha to join him for a quiet dinner at his apartment. The invitation felt significant, heavy with unspoken meaning, and Samantha's heart raced as she accepted, aware that the line between emotional support and intimacy was becoming blurred. That night, as they shared simple food and conversation, the air between them carried an electric tension, a sense of anticipation that neither could fully articulate. They laughed, they shared memories, and they talked about their hopes for the future. Yet there was a gentle undercurrent of longing that neither dared to voice. Daniel's gratitude for her presence was more tangible than ever, his gestures of care and attention lingering in ways that made Samantha's pulse quicken. She realized that helping him had grown into a quiet, potent desire to be part of his life in every possible way, to be the person he could rely on emotionally, to be the one who made his heart feel lighter. Every small touch, every subtle look, every shared smile carried significance, a language of the heart that neither needed to speak aloud. As they sat together, the rain tapping softly against the windows, Samantha felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. The intimacy they shared was thrilling, yet she understood the fragile line they were walking, the delicate balance between care and desire, between friendship and something more. Daniel confessed, almost hesitantly, that talking to her made him feel alive again, that he looked forward to her messages and presence more than he had realized, and Samantha's own heart ached with a mirrored longing, a realization that she felt equally drawn to him in ways that went far beyond mere friendship. They spent hours in quiet conversation, the city fading away, their worlds shrinking to the small apartment, the warmth of each other's presence, and the growing emotional bond that tethered their hearts together. Samantha noticed that her own life seemed fuller when she was with him, lighter, more vibrant, even as she wrestled with the tension of propriety and caution. Daniel's vulnerability and openness made her feel trusted, valued, and essential, and she understood that this emotional intimacy was forming a bond that would be difficult to undo. They lingered in the shared space between words and actions, reading each other's expressions, feeling the subtle pull of connection, aware that their hearts were speaking a language unspoken but understood. Samantha found herself replaying the night in her mind for days, thinking about the weight of the unspoken tension, the thrill of closeness, and the quiet ache of longing that had settled in her chest. Daniel, too, could not stop thinking about the way she listened, the way she cared, the way her presence seemed to ease his worries and make his life feel more manageable, more hopeful. Their bond had evolved into a delicate dance, a give and take of emotional support and quiet attraction, where each gesture, each word, and each glance carried significance beyond the surface. Samantha began to realize that their connection was no longer just about helping him. It had become a lifeline, a source of joy, excitement, and deep emotional fulfillment that neither of them could ignore. There was a growing tension, a sense of something unspoken waiting to emerge, yet both were cautious, aware of the implications and the potential for heartbreak if the line was crossed too hastily. Daniel asked for her presence more often, sometimes for comfort, sometimes simply for the reassurance of company, and Samantha, feeling the magnetic pull of her own emotions, gave it willingly, knowing that each moment spent together was shaping their hearts in ways that would be impossible to reverse. One quiet night, as they shared a simple dessert and soft conversation, Samantha felt the culmination of weeks of growing attachment, the quiet intensity of their bond, and the undeniable realization that they were entwined emotionally in ways that neither could fully name yet. There was a beauty in the unspoken, a tension that was both thrilling and frightening, a sense that they had crossed a threshold of intimacy that was fragile yet compelling. Samantha understood that she was no longer merely supporting a man in need. She had become a central figure in his emotional life, someone who mattered deeply, whose presence brought solace, hope, and an unexpected joy. Daniel's eyes, when they met hers, conveyed gratitude, longing, and a quiet question of what could be, and Samantha felt her own heart respond in kind, caught in the complicated web of care, attraction, and emotional closeness. They left that night with unspoken promises lingering in the air, both aware that their connection had shifted irrevocably, that their hearts were now delicately tethered to one another, and that the next steps they took would shape the course of a bond that was as beautiful as it was intense, leaving them both suspended between the comfort of friendship and the thrilling, terrifying pull of something more, their story unfolding in quiet moments, stolen glances, and the growing ache of hearts discovering each other in a way that felt inevitable, yet filled with uncertainty, anticipation, and a longing that neither could resist. The bond between Samantha and Daniel had grown so deep that it became impossible to ignore, a quiet force that pulled at their hearts with every message, every glance, every shared moment, and now the weight of what they felt demanded attention, a truth neither could sidestep any longer. Daniel, once hesitant to admit the depth of his reliance on her, finally spoke openly, his voice tinged with vulnerability and a hint of fear, confessing that her presence had become essential in his life, that he felt happier, lighter, and more alive whenever they spoke or spent time together. And Samantha, listening to his words, felt a mix of warmth, pride, and the fluttering ache of longing, knowing that her own feelings mirrored his in ways she could no longer deny. They had moved past casual support. Every interaction carried significance, every shared laugh or quiet conversation, a thread weaving their hearts closer together. And now the emotional intimacy they had cultivated felt like both a lifeline and a delicate danger, a connection too powerful to ignore, yet fragile enough to risk, if mishandled. Daniel admitted that he sometimes wished he could lean on her endlessly, that her presence was a comfort he craved not just in moments of trouble, but in the quiet spaces of everyday life. And Samantha, hearing this, understood with startling clarity that she had become more than a friend, more than a confidant. She was someone he needed, someone whose absence left a palpable emptiness, and someone whose presence made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. That realization both thrilled and terrified her, because while she wanted nothing more than to be there for him, she also understood the delicate balance they were walking, the line between deep emotional connection and overstepping boundaries, and the responsibility that came with being so important to someone's heart. They spent long evenings talking, sharing not just stories and worries, but also their hopes and fears for the future, their conversations rich with honesty and vulnerability, a mutual trust that made them feel safe while also heightening the tension of unspoken longing. Samantha noticed that her own heart raced at small gestures, the way Daniel's eyes lingered when he smiled at her, the soft way he reached for her hand, the way he listened so intently that it seemed as if he were reading her soul, and she realized that their bond had evolved into a powerful emotional intimacy, one that carried the sweetness of romance even without a single overtly romantic act. Daniel, in turn, found himself thinking about her constantly, reflecting on the comfort her words brought, the ease of her presence, and the way she seemed to understand him without explanation, a clarity he had not experienced with anyone else. The tension between them was subtle but undeniable. Moments of shared laughter could quickly become charged with anticipation, silences stretched into meaningful pauses, and each lingering glance became a question neither dared to voice aloud. One night, as they walked together beneath the city lights, the air crisp and quiet, Daniel reached for Samantha's hand with a gentle certainty, a small act that carried enormous weight, and she felt the flutter of her heart, a mixture of excitement, fear, and longing all at once, knowing that this was a pivotal moment in their evolving story. They sat on a park bench talking softly about life, about the struggles they had faced, about the comfort they had found in each other, and Samantha realized that what they shared was no longer casual. It was a connection that shaped their emotional worlds, a bond that both nurtured and challenged them, a love of the heart rather than the body, pure in its intention but complex in its consequences. Daniel admitted he had been afraid of being too vulnerable, of relying on someone so completely, but with Samantha, he could no longer hide, could no longer pretend that he didn't need her in ways that went beyond simple companionship, and Samantha, feeling the weight of his words, knew that she had crossed a threshold too, that her heart had already been claimed by the quiet depth of their connection. They laughed and reminisced, shared hopes for the future, and yet the air between them thrummed with the awareness that their relationship had changed fundamentally, that the emotional intimacy they had built was now a tender, powerful force neither could ignore. Samantha understood that love was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, woven through acts of care, through shared presence, through understanding and empathy, and in that quietness, there was a beauty, a profound depth that neither of them wanted to risk losing. As the night stretched on, they sat together in silence, letting their emotions linger, aware of how deeply intertwined their hearts had become, and Samantha felt both the thrill of being needed and the sobering responsibility of holding someone's trust so close to her own. Daniel looked at her, eyes soft with gratitude and longing, and whispered that her presence had changed his life, that he could not imagine facing his days without her support, her laughter, her kindness. And Samantha felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of their bond, a mixture of joy, longing, and the quiet ache of knowing that this emotional closeness was both fragile and precious. They held hands until the chill of the night made them shiver, reluctant to break the connection even for a moment, savoring the warmth, the intimacy, and the unspoken understanding that they had found in each other something rare, a companionship that filled voids, a love of the heart that asked for nothing more than presence, understanding, and care. Walking Samantha home, Daniel paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter, his voice low and sincere as he said that she had become his anchor, his comfort, his quiet happiness, and she felt the same ache mirrored in her own heart, a longing that had grown alongside theirs, a recognition that their connection was transforming into something neither of them could define fully, yet both felt with clarity. When they parted that night, Samantha stepped into her apartment with a heavy but full heart, knowing that their story had reached a turning point, that their hearts had become entwined in a way that was tender, romantic, and profoundly emotional, and that the choices they would make moving forward would carry weight, but also promise. She thought about the weeks they had spent building this bond, about the laughter, the support, the quiet glances, and the gentle gestures, and she realized that what had started as helping a man in need had blossomed into a relationship of emotional depth, intimacy, and mutual care. Samantha understood that love could be subtle and quiet, yet transformative, that emotional connection could hold more power than any grand declaration, and that their hearts had found in each other a space of safety, longing, and shared understanding. As she lay in bed that night, replaying every conversation, every laugh, every lingering look, she knew that the story of their bond was far from over, that the emotional intensity they had nurtured was only the beginning, and that their connection, filled with longing, hope, and gentle love, would continue to grow, shaping both their lives in ways neither could have anticipated, leaving them suspended in the beautiful tension of hearts discovering each other, hearts learning to rely on one another, and hearts quietly, irreversibly intertwined in a story of tenderness, emotional intimacy, and the profound power of being truly seen and needed.